We're going to go to Ms. Manning for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Chair McCall and Ranking Member Meeks and our witnesses for having this important hearing. Before we broke for votes, one of my colleagues objected vociferously to your suggestion that President Biden is working to address the problems at the border. And I'd like to point out that the Senate had a bipartisan border bill that had been negotiated fiercely, but they reached agreement on the bill. It would have provided serious solutions to the border issue, but unfortunately, former President Trump told Republicans in Congress that he would rather run on the border issue than solve that problem for the American people. So we never had a chance to vote on that border bill. I'd also like to mention that I am one of the original co-sponsors of the first bipartisan comprehensive immigration bill introduced in more than 10 years. It was introduced by one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Representative Salazar, along with Representative Escobar. I certainly wish that bill were supported by my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because that would address not only the border issues, but our other immigration issues. I'd like to ask Assistant Secretary Nichols, I'd like to ask you about an issue that has gotten some press recently, and that is a significant increase in migrants who are taking advantage of loose visa requirements in countries like Colombia and Nicaragua to transit to these countries by airplane and trying to get into the United States. And we've read reports that some of them are stuck in those airports, can't get out because they then can't get the flights they're trying to take to the U.S. It has caused enormous problems, but it's also a way for people to come to the U.S. illegally. So I wonder what the administration is doing to try to crack down on those flights by migrants and, frankly, by traffickers who are putting migrants on those flights. What is being done to get other countries to restrict this route?
We've worked with countries around the hemisphere, as well as ICAO and IATA, two key international aviation organizations, to crack down on charter flights that bring irregular migrants into our region. We meet with executives of commercial airlines to sensitize them to the risks of transporting non-bona fide travelers to our region. We have worked successfully with partners around the hemisphere to impose additional visa restrictions on countries that have a history of sending irregular migrants into our hemisphere. We've worked with partner nations to facilitate the repatriation of irregular migrants back to their countries of origin.
Are you seeing any success?
We are seeing success. The charter flight industry of irregular migrants has effectively ceased, and those migrants have tried to use commercial airliners or other means to access the region.
And can you tell me what impact the administration's regional processing centers or safe mobility offices has been having on migration from the region since they were established last year?
So the safe mobility offices have allowed people who wish to migrate to the United States to apply to do so through legal means, whether, for example, it's work-related visas like the H-2 categories of visas, or other parole mechanisms to access those facilities away from our border. They can do so within the region, and it's prevented thousands and thousands of intending migrants from approaching the U.S. southwest border.
Thank you. Mr. Camilleri, can you talk a little bit about more details about the USAID programs to help support civil society in countries with entrenched autocratic regimes like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua?
Certainly, Congresswoman, thank you for the important question. And the limited time we have, just to say precisely in those countries where the regimes that govern those three countries are determined to squash and snuff out civic space, democratic space, USAID is committed to supporting those who champion democracy, free speech, ultimately free elections, and the ability of people in those countries to choose their own leaders and the path that their countries will take. In some places we're fairly lonely, like in Nicaragua, in championing and supporting that work under difficult circumstances. But it's something that we're very committed to.
My time is about to expire. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. The chair now recognizes Mr. Davidson if he is prepared.
I thank the chairman. I think our witnesses, and when Secretary Blinken was here recently, I asked him about the Monroe Doctrine and when or whether it was a calculated decision by the United States to abandon that, and he seemed unfamiliar with the Monroe Doctrine. If I could just ask each of you, beginning